welcome everyone. This is the third installment of Writers at Work, and it is a collaboration between the Ball State Creative Writing Program and the Compass Advantage, which is a careers type of thing that I'm doing for the CSH Dean's office. And our guest tonight is the wonderful Jill Christman. And there she's looking so pretty. I have known Jill. I've known you longer than Mark has known you. Did you know that? It's true. I met Jill many years ago when I was finishing my graduate program and she was coming in. And I still remember her coming into my office because I was the person who was in charge of helping all the newbies find a place to live. Do you remember that?
I do. And then I vividly remember you were so helpful. I vividly remember you helping me teach my first literature class because I still have the floppy drive, which you gave me, which I have saved. I have no way to look at the floppy drive, of course, and it is a ridiculous thing to save. For some reason, it seems like an important artifact of my pedagogy, right?
All those lecture notes gone. I don't know where they are anymore either. I'm glad
I have them. I don't know how to access them, but
So I told my students last week that graduate school is where you make so many of your friends for life, and that's certainly been the case for us. So I want to thank Jill for being here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can kind of go through some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Let me get my PowerPoint up. Oh no, that's the very end of my talk. Look at me, I got to go all the way back. Sorry, this looks really nice, doesn't it?
Close your eyes.
Sorry about that. It's forever going to be like that. Maybe I could get Catherine to edit that part out. Okay. So welcome. We're going to be talking tonight about different kinds of publishing, trade, small press, and university press publishing. Make sure that you check out the sites.bsu.edu cardinal directions. That's where at the end of this, we will share the takeaways resources. We share the schedule. We've got somebody here. The schedule for the whole series, a video of this presentation. If you want to share it with somebody else, or in case you miss one, you can go back and watch them. Jill's lovely bio is there. Although I will tell you just right now that Jill is the author of 3 books. Her first was Darkroom by Georgia University of Georgia Press. Second was Borrowed Babies by She Books, and she's got one coming out in a couple of months called If This Were Fiction, a Love Story and Essays with University of Nebraska Press, and she's going to be talking about that tonight. Let's see. So remember to share what you learn. Feel free to tweet, and you can use our hashtag BSU Writers at Work. You can tag the Ball State Creative Writing account. My Twitter handle is DayCathy, and Jill's is Jill_Christman. She's very active on Twitter. I'm very proud of her. And just to kind of get started tonight, what I'd like you to do is to, if you're in the audience, I would like you to grab a book. And while you're looking for the book, just any book that you have around you, I'm sure there's something around you, some kind of book. I'm going to talk a little bit about the field of wine and the field of publishing. So when I go to the wine store and I'm looking at, when you look at something like this picture, like everything looks sort of the same. And what one thing that people often say is that they choose what wine to buy based on what has the prettiest label. And but people who are like into wine, like they're connoisseurs of it, or they make wine, when they stand at a shelf like this, they're not just seeing like glass and labels. They're seeing like, oh, I know that so-and-so makes that wine, and I know that that one's made at that place that I went and tried that wine that one time. And it's a little bit like that for for people who are writers, because when we stand at a bookshelf, it doesn't, once we start like really looking at them, we can tell you stories about those books and about who published them. And that's part of what I'm trying to give you a sense of that tonight, is like, how does one become a connoisseur of books? So one of the things that I'd like you to do is just to take the book that you have. I have the book that we're reading in my class. Let me undo the stop sharing here. So this is, oh gosh, the book that we're reading in our class, The Business of Being a Writer by Jane Friedman. And how do you know who published the book in your hands? Can anybody tell me, how do you figure out who published it or what published it? It's probably something you never think about or look at, but you'll need to start doing that if you want to publish books. How do you know? Cole says, the page we always skip over. Very clever, Cole. But that's true. Also, you can tell, Matt Demchak says you can Google it. You can also usually tell right on the spine of the book, right down here, usually you'll see either a symbol or it'll say, this book, Jane's book, is published by, it says Chicago, and that stands for University of Chicago Press. They publish a lot of books. Alan says it's the copyright page. Yes, and on the spine, and it's usually on the back cover too. So there's a bunch of places where this information lives, except that we so often we just ignore it. But one of the things that I hope that you'll start doing after tonight is start paying attention to that. The activity that I typically do when I teach this unit in a face-to-face class is I bring in this huge pile of books and I set them in front of you and I say, okay, now I want you to tell me which of these books was published by a trade publisher, which was published by a small press, which was published, which was self-published, if you can tell, which one was published by a university press, which one has the most money, which one was most expensive, which one was the cheapest. And there's things like production quality and stuff like that that can help us answer those questions. And that's actually one of the things that we have to think about when we're trying to decide how to publish our work. So I'm going to go through the different types of publishers. So trade, and I'm not even going to talk about academic, because typically and academic publishers are the ones that publish your textbooks. And maybe someday you'll want to publish a textbook, but I'm going to skip over those. We're going to talk about trade, university, and small presses. And then in 2 weeks, my former student, Katie Rank-Lev, is coming to talk about self-publishing. And so we're going to talk about 4 of these 5. And to get us started, here is, why is it? There we go. Okay, so let's start with university presses. A university press is, these are like University of Chicago Press, like I talked about here. These are presses that live at universities, usually the big research one, the ones with the big basketball programs and football programs. These are the ones that also have university presses. And just to give you a sense of, I tried for all of these examples to show you a couple of faculty or alumni of Ball State English and who have published in this way. So we've got Katie Didden's first book, The Glacier's Wake, which was published by, oh goodness, I looked that up. Do you remember, Jill, which press this was? I'm gonna say, is it LSU? No.
I can't remember.
I forgot to put it down.
I got a thing called Google on my phone. I'm going to know in a second.
Okay. Like I said, Jill's first book, Darkroom one, was published by University of Georgia Press. Jill, when you finish looking that up, I want you to tell them how that book ended up being published at Georgia and why. Did you find it?
I better tell you first because I'm not very fast. I usually talk into my Google, and I couldn't do that with y'all here.
Okay.
It's a crazy story, that story. And it's unrealistic. It gave me an unrealistic vision of how book publishing works. Went back when I was an upstart. So I rarely tell the story because I have been taught a lesson since then by the world. But what happened was the one part of the story that I love is that Darkroom is a memoir. And to my knowledge, it's the first memoir that came out of the University of Alabama program. There was not a nonfiction program at the time. However, the professors there were really open-minded and supportive. And I had a really incredible mentor, Sandy Huss, who was a fiction writer. But she supported I clearly like had to write, I was calling it an autobiography. We didn't even know what to call these things back then. It wasn't really a thing. And so I was working with images too, which also wasn't really a thing. So I support all these things you do where you think, this isn't a thing, but it feels like the thing you need to do. Continue to do the thing. This has actually paid off my entire career. And also I've been very happy as an artist, right? So do the thing, even when they're like, well, we don't have any of those. I'm like, well, I think that's what I'm doing, right? Mm-hmm. And also if you use photographs, nobody will publish it. And I'm like, well, I think that's what I need to do to tell this story. And also, Alabama actually refused to put it in the library. They're like, we have no concept of how to bind this. You know how at the end where you give it to the library after you your thesis? No, it wasn't in there. But then this is what happened. It was my thesis and I defended it as my thesis. And I was in my late 20s at the time, believe it or not. It was a very long time ago. And then I took a year to revise it, somewhat recklessly also. Every part of the story is reckless. I had just met Mark Neely, whom some of you might know. And I was like, gosh, I have this book and it's a giant mess and I don't know what to do with it. Here, you take it. And I'm going to go away for the summer. And then when I come back, you can tell me what you thought. And I got on the plane and I was like, what have I done? Because I thought he was really nice and I thought I might want to date him. And I left him with this thing. Anyway, I sent it off to, there were 2 nonfiction book prizes at the time.
Two whole ones.
2. No, like this was a long time ago, people.
I know.
It was like, and now I can't even remember the name of the second one. It was the one that, help me, Kathy.
Well, you won the AWP.
Well, right, but the Amy won not that same year, but the other one was the one she won.
Oh.
From Alabama also.
Yeah, blanking. I'm sorry.
Like the sparkly eyed boy, or it's a really good book.
Okay,
anyway, I sent it off to AWP. Like that was the first time I sent it anywhere. And it won. Just like that. So that's not the way the world works. It's not the way contests work. It was like some kind of fluke thing and I still remember a phone call when I got the telephone call from my new best friend. I still call him my new best friend, Barry Sanders, even though it's been like it's been over 20 years. Because he said when I answered the phone, he said, "This is your new best friend, Barry Sanders." And he was the judge of the contest. And so he called to tell me. And then I had a choice to make, actually, which is kind of interesting in this conversation. I'll just throw it out there and then you can keep going, Kathy, which is that in the meantime, I had started looking for an agent because I thought that that's what you needed to have. And so I was also successful in that and had someone interested in representing me. And so just as she was interested in representing me, I got this offer. So I had the bird in the hand, right? The bird in the hand was a university press. I could say, no, this agent thinks that she can sell it to one of the big press. There were more than 5 at that point, but but I didn't. And I'm so glad of that, because everything else in my life kind of unfolded from being able to publish this book so quickly. So it turns out I'm not really a big press writer type. So that's kind of the way the story went. It happened quickly. And it was really lucky. It was lucky.
One of the ways that, because at least at that point, creative nonfiction was so new, it wasn't considered maybe as marketable, although that's certainly different now. And also poetry. This is the way that if you write poetry, the way you get published is by entering contests. And then who wins the contest gets published, usually with a small press or a university press. And so that's kind of what happened with this one. That's correct?
Yep.
Yes. And if you could just briefly, because you said that today you were looking at, you have, one of the ways that university presses are different from trade is how the manuscripts get selected and approved.
Yeah.
And that is very different. So I wonder if you could talk briefly, the students who've taken DLR will be very interested in this.
So it kind of depends, actually. In the case of a book like Darkroom, AWP has a relationship with the University of Georgia Press, and they publish their creative nonfiction winners, right? So in that case, the judge of the contest chooses the book. In the case of a book like this one, which just arrived in my mailbox this very day, it's by a writer named Suzanne Ullman. She's pretty amazing. And it's basically a memoir and essays. It's called Shadow Migration, Mapping a Life. And I'm sure you can't see this, but I'm pleased because there's cranes flying across the top of the cover, and they're really cool. And there's one little crane right here, which I love design wise. I don't know if you can see that, but in this case, so this is a different university press. This is the University of Nebraska, and my new book is going to be coming out from them in the fall. But in this case, it's submitted, and then the acquisitions editor sends it out to readers, and then they get reader reports. It's a little bit different than when you're talking about an academic press, but
right.
Essentially, someone like Kathy or me, we get a lot of these requests. We can't say yes to all of them. But when it's a press I love, or a book I'm interested in, or a writer I'm interested in, I say yes. And then in that case, the readers read the book and do kind of report with a bunch of questions and reviews on whether or not you think the book should be published or not. And then the acquisitions editor looks at those reviews and makes a decision, and then works with that writer. Usually, I think it goes out to 3. Sometimes I know, like in the case of my book with Nebraska, they just send it out to 1.
Sometimes the way that an editor at a university press will develop a relationship with a writer or a book idea that they see that somebody's interested in doing, they'll kind of develop a relationship with them by having them do some of these reader reviews. One thing I wanted to say is, if you're interested in the idea of either submitting to or working at a university press, I highly recommend that we've got 2 people on campus who have experience in this area. Laura Suman, who works in the library. Actually, she's worked at Indiana University Press for a while, and another press that I'm blanking on, I think it was Dartmouth University Press, and she has she graduated with an English degree from Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, and then got a like a certificate in publishing after college, and that's kind of how she started her career in publishing, but then eventually moved over to libraries. And our very own Silas Hansen, who I can't believe he's not here tonight because he was here for the first 2 as a panelist. He did an internship called an externship at Indiana University Press a couple summers ago, and also can tell you a lot about how university presses work. The next type of publishing that I want to talk about is small or independent presses. Small presses are publishers. Now, instead of having a university to back them financially, these often have annual sales below a certain level, or maybe they only publish 5 to 10 titles in a year. They're much smaller in terms of scale than a trade publisher, and even than a university press. The terms indie publisher or independent press are kind of used interchangeably to talk about these. They're not part of large conglomerates or multinational corporations like the trade presses will be, that we're going to talk about in a minute. And oftentimes they rely on they're specialized. They have a particular aesthetic, or they have they only do poetry, for example, or a niche kind of nonfiction. And I put up here, this is part of the cover of Dion Irving's Quint, which is one of the books that you're going to be reading or can read in my class. That's an in-print book for this semester. That was published by 713 Books in Brooklyn. Matt Mullins published his book of stories, Three Ways of the Saw, with Atticus Books, which is a small press in, I think, Virginia. And who published Nice Things by Sean and Mark? Jill, I can't remember.
Oh, it was Ander Monson. He did it through Diagram.
Right, New Michigan Press.
New Michigan Press, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we actually, you know, there's quite a few people, not just in the faculty, but a lot of students. I mean, Alicia, who was here last year for In Print, published a book through a small press. So one of the things that's happened over the last, I'm gonna talk about this later, but one of the things that's happened since like the advent of desktop publishing is that, in a sense, it's never been easier to publish a book. Like, lots of people end up coming out of graduate school with a love of literature and also with some decent technology skills, and figure out how to, basically, there's no reason why you can't be a publisher yourself. And so the market and the number of small presses has just really, really grown over the last, especially the last 15 years. Let me see if there was anything more.
I would say one thing that I often say about this, and I think this might be a good juncture for it, is there's a big difference between printing a book and publishing a book, right?
Right.
And that is always something to keep in mind. Like I'm looking at the James Franco book right now, because who can't, right? And like in the case of Ander Monson at New Michigan, or, you know, he's the kind of publisher who puts a lot of energy behind a book, right? So if you publish with him, there's going to be a lot of social media, there's going to be events, there are going to be t-shirts, right? Prizes of various kinds, right? So that's another thing, right? So, you know, Anders had those skills since forever, right? But he's developed the skills of being a publisher, as well as, now he's a talented designer also, as well as a writer, of course, but he's kind of a Renaissance man, Ander Monson. But in a lot of cases, you could end up in a case where a book is printed, and I have seen this with former students, by an indie press that's a reputable indie press. You know, it's not like we're going to talk about other things later, but and then been very disappointed that, right, no one ever saw it, it was hard to order, it wasn't at the right distributors, etc. So that's important. I know you're getting to that.
Yeah, one of the things
printing versus publishing.
There are so many things to think about, you know, and one of the things I want everybody who's here to remember is that Jill or I or Sean or Mark or any of the faculty are always happy to help you. If somebody says, we'd like to publish your book, you should probably let us know and like show us what kind of deal it is and tell us more about this, because that's actually one of the things I'm going to talk about at the end are some things to watch out for with that. So then the last example I'm going to give is trade presses. Using as an example, Ashley Ford, one of our alums who just published this book this last fall, and Sarah Dometz, The Guinevere's. And actually these books were both published by Flatiron Books in New York City, which is a division of Macmillan. I had to kind of search around for that. There used to be so many publishers, and over the last 20 years or so, they've basically, the big ones eat the little ones, and now there's just basically 5 publishers. It wasn't that long ago that there were 6, and then somebody bought somebody, and now it's just 5. And in many ways, this is not good for writers, because it means that you don't, like, people, like, an imprint of Penguin Random House isn't going to bid against another division of Penguin Random House for your book. Like they're going to say, no, you have it or whatever. So it's getting harder and harder actually for writers to be able to get to make a living off of just selling their books to publishers. But the 5 that exist right now are Penguin Random House, and I'm so glad that it's not Random Penguin House, because it could be that, but it's not, thank goodness. Hachette Book Group, is that how you say it? Hachette, or is it Hachette? I don't even know.
I always say Hachette.
I say Hachette. HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, and Macmillan. Now, most of the time, if you, when you think publishing, this is what you're thinking about. You're probably like university press books and small press books. I grew up in a town where the only place to buy books was the grocery store, at the Kroger, and the little rack of mass market paperbacks. Like that was the only place that you could buy books where I was from. And so trade publishing was really the only thing I knew that existed. I didn't know that there were these other kinds of books until I went to graduate school. But these are the kinds of books that, they're for sale at Barnes and Noble and on Amazon, although you'll see a lot of small press books for sale on Amazon too, but especially when somebody says, I can't find your book at the airport. Why isn't your book in the airports? It's usually because you didn't publish with the trade press. And let's see, before I go on, did the distinctions between these 3 types, I mean, the books can look exactly the same, but everything that I'm going to talk about from here on kind of explains like what the differences are in terms of you, the writer. Are there any questions before I move on? Oh, I see.
There was one question in the chat I wanted to say. Oh, and it looks like another now.
Random Penguins sound like they know how to party. They do, the Random Penguins. Also, that's true, Alan. Alan Warren said, you also need an agent to get published through a trade press. Is that correct? Yes. Trade presses, you cannot just send your work unsolicited to one of the big 5 publishers. You have to have a literary agent do that for you, whereas actually agents can also submit your stuff to small presses as well, and to university presses, but a lot of times they don't bother because they think there's just not enough money in it for them. So oftentimes that's for you to be doing yourself. But thank you for bringing that up, Alan. I forgot to mention that. In a couple weeks, when we have Angela Jackson Brown and Sarah Hollowell here to talk about finding agents, I'm sure they're going to talk about that as well. So these are like the logos for those big 5. And the other thing that I would say, I know that you probably can't see this, but if you look on the left, like each of these big publishers has in the middle here, they have these divisions like Tor, St. Martin's Press, Henry Holt, Farrar, Straus and Giroux, and Macmillan Children's. Those all used to be their own publishers, but now they're divisions of Macmillan. And then over here on the far left is like all the little imprints. And so you might look at a book and it might say, this is a Picador book. And you're like, oh, I've heard that name. And then you have to maybe do a little digging to find out that Picador is a division of this, which is an imprint of that sort of thing. So it is really important that you can usually find that stuff by Googling. So I just wanted to make
Ashley's, there are like imprints within imprints too. Like Ashley's book is an Oprah book within Flatiron so the imprints, it's like Russian nesting dolls as you get down. And so sometimes I'm reading a book that's a particular imprint and then I'm surprised when I follow it up to its mother.
Why do you know why why the imprint is so popular? Do you know what I mean? Like why have imprints
this is a theory according to Jill Chrisman, but it seems to me to be in every case it's a matter of like defining a brand within a brand, right? And so it seems to me to be kind of a marketing angle in that way, right?
Right.
So I know that Ann Patchett recently, I can't even remember the name of this imprint, and you can get imprints, right? Like, so Roxane Gay has an imprint now. So you can get an imprint that is attached to a person who gets to be
Right.
the editor and do the choosing. And then they've got a certain brand that they're bringing to that imprint. I know in Ann Patchett's case, it's specifically, she's working on books about grief, right? So sometimes it's about a topic, sometimes it's about bringing more marginalized writers into publishing, sometimes it's about, so I think that it breaks down in different ways. But that's my sense of it, is that they all seem to be a niche, and then there are niches within niches.
Right. And then just imagine being a literary agent and being responsible to know the differences between
Right.
all those books. Like, so that when they're reading your manuscript, they're trying to think, where would this be a good fit? And that's my suggestion to all of you, is you can decide for yourself whether writing a book that would fit in a certain place is something you want to think about, or something that you don't want to think about. I can't think about that. That makes me just gives me freaking hives. Excuse my language, but it does. But
yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying at the beginning. I don't know, it gives me hives also. I can feel them, actually. I'm starting to itch even as we speak. But also, if you do that, then by the time you have the book done, if you're chasing a particular thing that you think is the thing is going to be over. So
yes,
do your own thing, man. That really,
right.
I cannot say that enough.
Right.
Like when I
That is-
started writing, this is just, I loved this. It's back now, this little magazine that comes out from Creative Nonfiction. It's like little chat books they make. It's called True Story. I started writing, like, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, these really long essays. They were between like 10 and 15,000 words, right? Borrowed Babies is one of them, actually.
Right.
And Mark was laughing at me, he's a poet and he's in there, and I'm writing these and he's like, what are you doing? And my joke was, it was stolen from a poet. It was like, I'm writing 10,000 word essays to fill the great demand for them. Like there was no place to publish them. And I thought to myself, this is crazy. This is like career suicide. And I was like, I don't care. This is a 10,000 word essay, right?
That's how long it
And
needs to
then,
be.
in this case, the world rewarded me. Like long form came on the interwebs, and I got one there. True Story came along, and I got one there. There was like a long story contest, and that's how I published. So like oftentimes you do the thing, and you'll be in the right place at the right time when the publishing catches up with you, right? So
Yep. That's something that happens for sure. One of the things that's in the takeaways for you is this is Key Book Publishing Paths by Jane Friedman. And she's a like a publishing industry insider, and she keeps track of all this stuff. And so she tries to talk about, like, what are the big five, who are the other traditional, then what's small presses. And then this is where it gets, like, this is where I've had to start paying attention, is what is a hybrid publisher? What is a indie or do it yourself? Or what is social publishing? I'm actually starting to see my students who write for things like Wattpad and stuff like that are then getting people interested in their work through that. And so I cannot claim to be an expert, but this little guide is in the takeaways that you're going to get. And I definitely recommend that you check this out when you're looking over the stuff for tonight. These are just some terms that I thought I wanted to make sure that we all know what they are. And Jill, you can chime in on these too if you want. We already kind of talked what a literary agent is, and the students in my class, your reading for next week is going to talk all about like the kinds of things that literary agents do. They're sort of middlemen between and middle women between the author and the publishing houses, especially with trade. Do you want to explain what an advance is, Jill?
An advance is an advance. It's literally an advance against the profits that the book makes, right? So if I am And the idea of the advance is to give the writer the opportunity to focus on writing the book, right? So say I'm writing a book and it goes to auction and it sells for 500,000, I get a $500,000 advance. Then that gives me that time. This has never happened to me. I'm just telling stories for the fun of it. That gives me that time to work. Now, of course, I won't get any of my, the rest of my contract will speak to the percentage I get of the profits, right? So I will not get that until I do what this thing called earning out my advance, right?
Right.
So then the publisher has to earn out. So one thing to know about this, if you're a person who has a really big advance, we've been up close and personal with this with Ashley's book, Somebody's Daughter.
Right.
We've gotten to see this in action. The support that your publisher is going to give to that book in terms of marketing and publicity is probably going to be pretty good because they've already made a big investment, right? And so they want to follow their investment with more money. So that's my spiel on advances.
I didn't know when I sold my first book, The Circus in Winter, that I made an advance of, I think it was $15,000, but they also wrote into the contract that any of the publisher's expenses in sending me out on a book tour also got added to that. And I didn't realize this. And when they would book me in these super expensive hotels, I just thought I was living large, but all it meant was that it just was going to take all that much longer for that book for the publisher to recoup their expenses for me to ever get any royalties. So it took like 10 or 15 years before I ever saw a penny for that book. So that's what that means, advance on royalties. An ARC is an advanced reader's copy. And that has something to do with the next term, pre-pub review. So you've probably seen in your, like on Amazon, they're always talking about reviews from Kirkus and Library Journal and Publishers Weekly. So one of the things that a publisher will try to do is to put out what they call bound galleys, which are pretty simple, or they might put out like something that looks like an actual paperback of the book itself, the advanced reader's copy, and they send that to all these reviewers trying to get the book reviewed, because how well your book does with those pre-pub reviews determines how many of the few newspapers and magazines left in America that review books, how many of them are going to bother. So like if your book doesn't get a starred review in Kirkus and Library Journal and Publishers Weekly, in all the books that come out in a season, they may not necessarily pay attention to a book unless it gets a starred review. And that's what pre-pub reviews are, is basically there's just so many books that come out every season that somebody has to kind of wade through it and say, here's the ones you should pay attention to, and here's the ones not to pay attention to. So that's that sort of gatekeeping that happens there.
And that's another place your publisher really comes in handy, right? It's vital because your publisher needs to be investing in those advanced reader copies and getting them into the right hands and talking the book up and doing that kind of pre-publication work that's so essential.
And if they're not doing that, then you're not getting as good of a deal, and maybe your publisher isn't as good as maybe they like to think that they are. Yeah. One thing that you've probably noticed, that when you go to a bookstore, there are certain places where books are more prominent, like the end cap at a bookstore, those tables where everything is sort of stacked there, nicely, or the where you go in and like all the books are face out. And then you go further into the bookstore and everything is like just spine out. Well, I don't know if you realize this, but publishers pay bookstores for that, in a sense, product placement. And so that's something I didn't realize. I thought that people that worked in the bookstore got to decide what I'm going to see and what I'm not going to see. But actually that's why I wanted to put that in there, end cap. POD stands for print on demand, which is actually the state that my first book, Circus in Winter, is in now, is that it basically, they have sold all of the copies that they printed when the book came out, and now it's just in what's called print on demand. So if you go to Amazon and order The Circus in Winter, they'll print one book and send it to you. And that's, I mean, I guess it's good, but it also, I mean, technically my book is out of print because there are no more books printed anymore. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that. Did you, unsolicited manuscript, who takes, of all the book, Jill, of all the publishers that we, different ways of publishing, which ones take unsolicited manuscripts?
Well, university presses do.
Mhm.
And most indie presses, though not all the time,
Yep.
sometimes they have reading periods when they'll take unsolicited manuscripts.
Yep.
And your trade presses aren't going to take your unsolicited manuscript, and they're typically not even going to take your unagented manuscript. There are
Right.
exceptions, like, again, speaking of Roxane Gay, when she first started taking her, she was taking unagented manuscripts, and until she found her first books for it to come out in the first season. But now she is no longer doing that. So that's who.
Are there any other terms? Let me put this to the people who are here tonight. Are there any other terms that you hear people talking about, or that we've even used without realizing that we didn't tell you what it meant? Any other terms that you're curious to know what they mean? Okay, well, if something comes up, you just let me know.
Oh, I was going to mention one. So I helped out with Midwest Writers Workshop.
Yep.
It would have been last academic year.
Yep.
And one term I got from that was comp titles. So
Yes.
knowing other books in your genre that have been published maybe within the last 5 years that you can say when you're writing to an agent or to a publisher or whoever, that you can compare your work to a little bit.
I worked on that during my sabbatical last semester, and it made me want to die. But yes, I hate one of the things. This is probably one thing that Jill and I have in common, is that the business side of publishing is I don't like it. I don't like having to pick 3 books that are in the same vein as my book. I don't think anything's like my book, or I think that my book is like a book that was published 40 years ago. And I don't want to
sell well. That's mine. Whenever I do comps,
Yeah.
like, "Well, you know that book didn't sell well." I'm like, I love that book.
book. I don't care. So a former student of mine, Michelle Brower, is a agent, and that's actually one of the things that when you approach her as an author and you want to get her to read your work and maybe think about taking you on, she'll say, give me 3 comps for what you're doing, what this book is. And I'm just like, I don't want to write a book that's like anything else. And so I really suck. I mean, that's one of the reasons I teach this class and talk about these subjects, is that I just made so many mistakes because of my own, like, nobody talked about this when we were in school. That's another big thing. And so that's one of the reasons why I do try to talk about it some. So I want to talk just really briefly. This is a little visualization thing I do about how the internet changed publishing. So a couple of years, there's this guy named Richard Nash, and he used to run this book publishing house called Soft Skull Press. And now he's become sort of a publishing guru. And he said, traditional publishing is a tiny industry perched atop a massive hobby. And I've never heard of a better way of describing sort of what publishing looks like, and also how that metaphor has changed because of the internet. So just remember, traditional publishing, trade publishing, is that tiny little thing on top of the massive hobby. But if you were in, like, let's say it's 1912 and there is no internet, and somebody came up to you, and let's say you were just, living in Muncie, Indiana, you were just somebody, and you like to write stories or you like to write poems, and somebody said, "Are you a writer?" You would probably say no. because you probably at that point didn't know any other writers. You would have no reason unless you somehow made it up to the little triangle on top. Like those are the people who called themselves writers. The people in the massive hobby did not think of themselves as writers. But the thing that's happened over the last 20 years is now all the hobbyists are connected. Like they can actually meet each other and talk to each other and connect with each other through social media, through blogs, through going to graduate programs together. They can find each other and form communities. You've never known a book world that was community-less. That you've always known it as a community, but it hasn't always been that case. So now, like it's 100 years later, it's 2012, and somebody says, and you're in the massive hobby, and someone says, are you a writer? You're much more likely to say, yeah, I'm a writer, or at least I'm trying to be, by virtue of the fact that like you have actually maybe met a writer, you know other people who are interested in it, you've maybe taken creative writing classes. What's happened is that people, and this is the other thing that you have to watch out for, is that people are monetizing the massive hobby. They're saying there's millions of people in the massive hobby who are interested in writing. They haven't made it to that tippy top yet, but we can do something with all these people in there. And that's kind of what I wanted to please excuse my really bad hand-drawn slides. So like, here are the people who, quote, have been published. And so those people feel like, yes, I'm a real writer because I've made it to the top of the whatever, top of the triangle. But what's happened, see, look, when I made this, there were 6, but now there's 5. So anyway, so within the massive hobby, all those people who maybe haven't been published through the big publishers, the trade publishers, all of these people 100 years ago wouldn't have thought of themselves as writers, but now they do, mostly because like they can be forming a community around a certain topic or around a certain interest in a genre and publish that stuff. And they might call themselves indie. They might call it might be around a university press. It might be around a small press or a genre, or maybe like before Jane Friedman published the book for our class, this woman basically had a blog that every single person who wanted to be a writer read. She'd never published a book, but she had been read by more people than me, that's for sure. And so like who gets to call themselves a writer now is so different because of the internet and because of how connected we all are. Jill, does this make any sense, even though my drawings are really bad about what I'm saying about this?
It does make me want a cookie. But yeah, I mean, I guess my question to you would be like, what part of, I think back to my early days as a writer. I don't know if you all did this when you were in high school. I went to a one-room schoolhouse on a mountain, and I would go back and write, I am a writer, I am a writer, I am a writer, like a million times in my notebook just to convince myself that I was. But like, I mean, I think I was a writer way before, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that, I guess what I'm getting at, and I'm not being very articulate, like, what's the purpose of someone being able to define themselves as a writer, do you think? Like, why do we need that?
Well, I think part of it is the amount of emotional energy that it takes to deal with the time it takes to be a writer, to write something, to deal with the rejection. Like, I think that we're much more inclined to keep at it now than we would have been 100 years ago. Does that make sense? Because we have people to keep us going. And I also think like it really creates a very interesting, one of the things I'll say is that, like, I think it's good and it's awesome that the people that get published by the big five, like those people definitely, they're like, yeah, I'm a writer. These are the people that society has decided, yes, these are the writers. But it
Don't you
wasn't
think
that
it's
long ago.
possible that sometimes those people think no? I mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know. I
Oh,
guess
yeah.
I guess that I'm saying that I'm not sure that I buy that the self-definition comes from who publishes you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just know so
do.
many people who would not, who wouldn't feel that way, and plenty of people who've been published by the big six who probably maybe don't think of them as themselves as writers anymore. Like, I don't know that it's a golden ticket exactly.
I don't think so either. And one of the things that I think is actually awesome is that we have more of a we have a choice about what kind of publishing is really best for us, depending on our. I thought that publishing with the trade presses was like, that's what it meant to be a real writer. But it actually is very, as you can tell from the way I've talked about it, it's counter to, like, my disposition is not very well suited to publishing that way. And I think that there are lots of ways to be a writer, to be published. And I think that's all to the good. That
Yeah.
we shouldn't think that just only the people at the top are like, that's the way that that's the only thing that matters. Like, I don't like
Yeah.
people who think that way.
Yeah.
And
I
I think that, you know, in a time when you can literally, there are places like where you can take you can put your book on a thumb drive and go to Kinko's and, you know, have it printed and come out and look like, quote, a real book. Like, that's kind of what you were talking about, Jill. Like, there's a difference. What was it that you said? There's a difference between printing a book and publishing.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just curious if any of the people here can talk just briefly, like either out loud or in the chat, like, at what point do you think that someone gets to be called a writer? Is it like, you know, the first time they, you know, write something, they're a writer? Or is there, or maybe there's a difference to you between like what it means to be an author and a writer? I don't know. I'm just curious about this, how other people, especially people who are younger than me, feel about this issue. Class? Thoughts? Comments? Ooh, there's some in the chat. Samuel says, a person is a writer when they put words on a page. Cole says, I didn't feel like a writer until I got my first rejection letter. Very good. Alan says, the pursuit of others reading your work seems writerly to me, trying to get others to see it being read. So that's a very important part of the definition, I think. Very good. Ella says, both writing it down and sharing it, I think, is part of it. Aw. A writer is someone who has goals for their writing. Kayla says, I've never received a rejection letter. Maybe it happens eventually. It happens eventually. Rebecca, I've always felt like a writer despite never writing on a regular basis, probably thanks to my family and friends' support. I always felt like a writer. Like, it was one of those things I knew about myself very young. I had no idea what I was supposed to do with it. But yeah, I mean, I felt that very young as well. And I didn't write all that. Rejection letters are big, mean, nice energy. Yes. I still remember I was at Alabama, Jill, and I had gotten a rejection from Georgia Review, and I called my mom, and it was a typed one. It was like all written out, like, you know, long, nice rejection. And I called my mom and said, Mom, I got a typed rejection from Georgia Review. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, it's awesome. It's awesome. You don't understand. So like, that's actually, if you come back next week, that's what we're going to be talking about next week, is I'm going to show you all my rejection letters from trying to submit my work to literary magazines. I want to say a few things about one of the ways that you try to tell the difference between, like, is this publisher, like, do they have it together? Is this is what we mean when we say there's a difference between printing and publishing, okay? And some of that, oh, and there's so many things in the chat. We're getting all of these things in here. Oh, do I have time to keep going? Oh, no, I don't. I don't have time to keep going. Okay, what I'm gonna do, hold on, is I am going to remind you that next week is talking about submitting to literary magazines.